Try to take a film, television show, sometimes a video game, don't really quote me on that, break it down, flip it, and reverse it while giving you our insights, analysis, and some interesting facts and tidbits you might not have known. Or maybe you did know, in which case we don't really care. I'm Derek, and today we are going to be talking Neon Genesis Evangelion episode 19. Oh my god, Matty boy, I'm so excited. You have no idea how, all week I was waiting for you to, actually watch this episode. I was getting annoyed, subtly annoyed with the passing days. I haven't heard anything yet. There's no way he's watched it because he would say something. Oh my god. All right. I'm excited. How are you doing today? I guess I should start with some small talk first.
Good. I forgot I didn't watch this episode.
Ah, okay. Well, show's over. I'm going to go rewatch the episode and then I'll talk about it myself.
No, I wanted to wait because we had talked about it, and just with the start of the episode, I knew this was going to be a pretty big one, which I would say is easily the biggest we've seen yet.
Yep.
So I didn't want to have all this excitement and anticipation that was sitting there all week. I wanted to have a day so I could still maybe relive some of the feelings I felt.
Right.
Just because the longer you let it pass, the more you forget about it a little bit. But it's fresh right now. It's right there.
Yeah.
So it was. Man, that's an episode. That's for sure. I don't know how best to describe that.
Yeah, that was absolutely a hell of an episode. I think this entire intro I've been smiling, essentially. I'm so excited. So we're talking about a man's battle / introjection. This aired initially on February 7th, 1996. Matt, do you know what introjection, what the definition is?
Give it to me.
It is the unconscious adoption of the ideas or attitudes of others. So even within that title, you've got kind of an interesting idea there of maybe what to expect. It's an unusual vocabulary word, not a term thrown around a lot, but it's so Eva. Just hearing that definition, you're like, oh, that really feels like a concept that would be Eva heavy. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, perfectly suited. And I love anytime they give a secondary title to an episode, it's usually a good indicator of almost the direction it's going to go. It's the one's more broad and then the next one kind of drills down a little bit more. And it's just ooh, okay, this is interesting. So as we talked about last episode, we got in just a little bit to this episode, I think, just talking about the first few seconds and all that we saw. But we begin with Shinji still inside Eva Unit 1. And he is basically ready to burn the whole bitch down.
He is pissed.
Pissed. He is standing on top of basically this. It's Nerv HQ. It's almost like a pyramid-looking structure within the Geofront. He's just ready to kick shit down. He's pissed off, and he's essentially saying he's livid at Gendo for what he's had him do. Essentially, effectively using him to potentially kill, although we see that Toji was recovered from it, potentially kill one of his best friends. And Shinji is saying, I have 185 seconds of power left, and that's more than enough time to demolish half of HQ. And this is oh, Shinji's got some nuts on him all of a sudden. All right, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. Shinji to get assertive, even a little bit aggressive, not taking people's crap anymore. This is exciting.
Yeah, on top of that statement, they talk about linking circuits have been severed. The plug eject signal has been locked out by the pilot. So he has made it very clear, you are not taking over this Eva, and I might fucking just destroy the whole thing right now. I am that level of pissed. Yep. Which we also hear him scream at somebody, which I'm trying to think back. I'm have we heard him yell before? And what context was it in? Because I can't really remember him ever getting heated in a moment.
Yeah, he's argued with Asuka where he's raised his voice.
Yes.
This is a little different, like you said. They're trying to reason with him and tell him why, as awful as that was, if it weren't for Gendo's actions, Shinji wasn't fighting back. If it weren't for Gendo's actions, basically everything would have been lost. And that is true. That is true. Shinji was refusing to fight.
Within reason.
Yeah. And this episode gets into that even more, where you're oh, okay. yeah, the stakes were massive. And Gendo in his position would understand that. It's an awful thing. So it's like Shinji does not want to hear this though. So yes, he's snapping at the people trying to say like, you would have died if Gendo didn't do what he did. And he's like, I don't care. Like, you're not going to use me to do something like that and get away with it, basically. And right as you think Shinji is finally going to lay down the law and assert himself, Gendo basically says like, I'm tired of this childish tantrum. Increase the LCL pressure to the maximum level. And I was like, that doesn't sound good. What's that going to do? Apparently, it makes Shinji just black the hell out immediately. Shinji's like, you can't stop. Damn it. Just
And he's like full well ready to, he's like, I'm taking the manual controls. We're going to
Yep.
burn this bitch down. Like, that was the last straw. Like, he's ready to take action if you're going to try to get me out of this thing.
And it's interesting too, because like I said, I can see the other side of this just a little bit. That doesn't forgive that it's an awful thing and that Shinji had to do this. It doesn't forgive that Toji was the choice of all people. But there is truth to they were going to lose everything. Units 0 and 2 were already taken out, like in a matter of seconds. And now Unit 1, which we know is the one that Gendo is protecting above all else, is, basically about to be destroyed as well. It's everything on the line. Gendo's entire plan, the details of which we still don't fully understand, barely understand at all, frankly, is at risk, and potentially the fate of humanity. And Shinji can't bring himself, even not knowing who it is at the time, can't bring himself to fight because he doesn't want to risk killing another person. So I can see that. But I also understand Shinji's rage, and Gendo just does not care. And I think the reason for that is probably because now that they've tested the dummy plug in action, I think Gendo doesn't really see Shinji as essential anymore.
Oh, there's no point.
Yeah. Because now it's like, all right, I basically have Rei's obedient consciousness. The dummy plug is like a person, their consciousness minus their humanity almost. There's no conscience there. And they'll do whatever. Like, they don't just win the fight. They will brutalize to the point that nothing is left because they feel nothing. And so that's what Gendo's thinking. Like, I have the perfect soldier now. I don't need him anymore. So if he's not going to comply, shut him down, knock him out, whatever. And Shinji is basically, he's basically in a very precarious spot here. And he's been kind of on the outskirts at times with Nerv, but this is going to be a little bit different. We then cut to this scene of the cleanup, which is just blood and gore everywhere across the city. You got like brains and intestines scattered out from the wreck to Unit 3. And it's just a complete mess. They talk about how Shinji had to be cut out with basically a laser torch through the emergency hatch. So I guess he was still fighting it even after the LCL increase. He was still trying to lock them out. Or maybe it's something where, like, because he locked it from the inside, they were having a hard time getting through and had to take a different route. I like to think that even though he was half conscious, he was still fighting them and resisting.
Yeah.
Because that just feels like the moment he's at. He is at his absolute, I am completely over this. I'm going to just do anything I can to fight you and resist you, because I'm not just going to let you keep walking over me and hurting people, hurting me. It's just, I'm done.
Well, I think if the actions taken by Gendo had ended when the fight ended, this would have been a different conversation. So if he disables the angel,
you talking about like when he breaks its neck?
Yeah, he breaks his neck. Okay, cut the dummy.
Yeah.
Then we're good. I think Shinji's not going to have a problem. I don't think anything like that. But Gendo's like lack of care for anyone other than himself. And I think he just wanted to see what its power was. It wasn't even like, hey, really, maybe it's not dead. We need to fully destroy it. He wants to see, like, how crazy is this thing? And that test was taken at the cost of Toji's life.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I think Gendo wanted to see the full extent of what it would do. Yes, I think Shinji would have still been mad even if Gendo had turned off the dummy plug after the angels had its neck broken, but it would have been a more controlled thing. It's the fact of the brutality,
Yeah.
um, especially then learning that it was his friend that really sets him off. But Gendo wanted to see if he had, like I said earlier, kind of this perfect soldier sort of thing, this no consciousness, no conscience, no remorse, anything, no empathy towards the enemy. All he wanted to see is if I point and say kill, you kill. That's all he wanted. And so, yeah, he wanted to see to what length it would go. And I think Gendo is, he's always so close to the vest as far as his emotions. I imagine internally he probably had the biggest effing grin on his face watching that scene unfold, even as horrible as it was. Other people are like literally like holding in gag reflexes, trying not to vomit, seeing the destruction. Again, understanding that there's a human life in there whose neural connection is tied to all of this happening. And yeah, it's very much where Gendo's just like, okay, this is what I wanted. This is what I ordered. We got it. Awesome. And it just does not matter to him what the fallout or consequences are, because all that he sees is the thing that I wanted that'll get me where I want to go is working. Everything else is secondary or
Yep.
not even relevant to begin with. So from there, we go to the hospital and we actually see Asuka and Ray there. They're together, but not really. I thought the blocking of this scene or this shot is kind of interesting. Ray is sitting down on the bench and Asuka's kind of leaning against the wall, but there is a fairly noticeable difference as far as like how far apart they're standing. The fact that Asuka is standing whereas Ray is sitting, I kind of drew from that she's sort of trying to her own like little subtle power dynamic she's trying to impress upon a scene, like, oh, I'm above you or I'm looking down on you sort of thing, where she still kind of has this sense of superiority. But the fact that Shinji is in the hospital, but he doesn't have physical injuries, it's all emotional, mental, whatever. They're there. And that's kind of interesting because Asuka and Shinji have been really drifting apart in recent episodes. Like,
Yeah.
basically ever since the scene or the episode where she decided that she wanted to practice kissing, ever since that, they've been on just completely opposite trajectories. And I thought it was interesting they were both there. Asuka makes mention as well that she doesn't think, even though he has no physical injuries, she says she doesn't think he's going to bounce back from this. How did you take that first? Like when she said that, what did you take from that?
I guess in what sense? What are you asking me here?
Well, so the way I took that when it was presented is Shinji has been defiant in the past and challenged, whether it was Misato, Gendo, whoever. He's been defiant. He's never tried to basically destroy Nerv. He's never turned to actually try and bite the hand that feeds, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I took that as they aren't going to let him come back from this. There is no coming back from this. That's how I took it. But as I was digging deeper into this episode, I seemed to notice a sentiment of sort of the opposite being true. Not the opposite, I guess, but the takeaway being that like his emotional stability will never recover from this. And I could see that a little bit given what happened to Toji, but I don't know. I guess I was thinking more in like an organizational sort of sense that they weren't going to let him come back, and he's already basically declared he's done. So it's like, yeah, he's not going to come back from this.
Yeah, I didn't get anything about his mental state from that. I got that more of like, they're never going to let him back in an Eva from this point forward because he's reckless and he's like a danger to them. He's not going to comply with their wishes. Whereas she's very like by the book, like you tell me to get something done, I'm literally going to do it, whether it costs me my life. She's never really backed down from a fight. Whereas he's made it very clear that if this goes against my wishes, this goes against my morals, I'm not going to be doing it from this point forward. And there's been so much of that like back and forth of like, I'm running away, I'm doing this, I don't want to be here. It's like you can only put up with that so long before it's like, okay, we can't use this guy anymore. Like, he's not reliable, which I think is how Asuka is looking at him, is like, he's not a reliable candidate for an Eva pilot at this point. And I definitely feel there's a huge disconnect between them. Before, I felt like there was like some interest, maybe some, like she likes him.
Yeah.
But the longer we go, the more I feel that there's a very big disconnect there. And maybe it'll come back, which is funny because she complains about how complacent he is.
Yeah.
But the more he really sticks his neck out and becomes his own person, she seems to disassociate from him even more, which is like, why are you going away from him? Like, he's doing the exact thing that you're complaining about.
Because he becomes unpredictable. He doesn't fit into the box she can anticipate or expect. Like, I do think that there's some degree of that irritates her on that side of it as well, that when he doesn't behave the way she expects, it's annoying because it's him. Well, why are you doing this? You don't act this way.
Damned if you are, damned if you aren't.
Exactly. So that's kind of how I see it. And with both of them being there, I mean, obviously we've mentioned how Rei is concerned about Shinji, how she's seemingly growing a little bit more like expressive in emotion towards Shinji in some way, even if it's not quite clear what that emotion is necessarily. And Asuka, as turbulent as her time with Shinji has been, especially recently, the fact that they're there, it's kind of like that fellow soldier in the trenches sort of thing is kind of how I view it. Like, while Asuka, for instance, might look down at Shinji and think like, yeah, he's kind of coming unglued. He's weak. He's not built for this the same way. While I do think she views him that way, I think she also understands that at least a little part of that is in her too. And so while she wouldn't say as much, I think she can at least understand where he's coming from. And so I do think there's almost like a little bit of a camaraderie there to some extent, where she's like, I understand this is like a really difficult thing. So like, I feel for you just a little bit for everything you're going through, but I don't know if you're cut out for this, essentially. Yeah. And I don't, whereas they both have their connections individually with Shinji, they have no connection at all. And I think the blocking of that shot I was talking about really emphasizes that. It's like, it's not even a perfect triangle. It's just a V or whatever, essentially, if you look at it visually. So yeah, it's interesting. And then we're still at the hospital. We cut to Toji waking up in the hospital bed. He sees a short distance away, Shinji is lying there next to him. Thought that was weird that they were in the same room. And he's kind of wondering, like, well, why is Shinji here? And then we get a strange vision back to the subway scene. You get that real sepia tone kind of vision thing. And he's watching a conversation between Shinji and Rei from a distance. And it's kind of like they're already in mid-conversation. So this scene is another one where it's just like, all right, there's a lot that can be interpreted from this, because obviously Shinji is still unconscious in his hospital bed at the time. Rei is over in the other room. So it's unclear. It's like, is this actually happening? Because what they're talking about is not stuff that Toji should be aware of. So it's interesting. What did you take from that? I have some thoughts, but I want to get yours first.
So there's a mention before this, and Asuka is talking about dreaming, and Rei says something that makes Asuka question whether she knows what dreaming is, to which we get the impression that no, she doesn't. So Rei doesn't dream. Why doesn't she dream? And then we get into this train scene, which, if you're thinking back, this is almost exactly like the conversation that Shinji has with the angel.
Yeah.
Whereas Rei is taking the place of the angel in this shot.
Yeah.
Now, I
can't
recall,
angel that was little Shinji.
Yes. Now, the conversation isn't beat for beat, but it's very close. And this makes me question more of like what Rei is. I'm thinking that the reason that Toji is a part of this is something to do with when the angel overtook his Eva, that he is somehow integrated with it at this point. And I don't I don't know really to what extent. And I think Shinji is in the same boat, is that he spent so much time inside of this Dirac sea with this angel literally coming to the point of death. And I think that the angel, it's so hard. There's so many different ways that I could interpret this, but I think that there is something between the three of them that they share now. I think Rei, Toji, and Shinji all have some connection, whether that be that maybe Rei is part angel or is an angel. And she's kind of infiltrating Shinji at this time, and Toji is now able to kind of like channel that.
Yeah.
I would say like my best interpretation of like trying to relate this to some other piece of media is like, I think The Matrix, maybe the second or third one, when, spoiler alert if you haven't seen The Matrix, dear Lord, but he is essentially getting into the Matrix without being plugged in at this point. So it's like, how are you here? What is this place that you are? It's like they're in this like limbo state where they have access to this, but no one else does. And I feel like maybe that has something to do with Rei having to be in close contact for them to be there. I mean, it's like they're all in the room together. I think there's something tied with that as well.
Okay, interesting.
What are your thoughts?
Very similar line of thinking. You mentioned Shinji spent time in the Dirac Sea. We know, obviously, in this last episode, Toji was basically overwhelmed, encompassed by the angel and everything, locked in, and they talked about contamination. And we know that that same angel, Unit 3, the 13th angel, as it became, attacked Rei, and before they jettisoned her arm, it was infecting her. So I think all three of them share that now, that they have all been infected on some level by an angel. And I think of this as almost like a psychic plane, essentially, where it's like within their subconscious, they're almost like able to understand, like, not as if it's an actual conversation, but it's like they can almost understand one another's perspective and like what's in their heart, essentially. And so Rei, after talking with Asuka, has this sort of feeling and understanding of like maybe what Shinji is wrestling with right now, even though she herself not good with emotions. I think that's why like her line of questioning is along those lines, where it's a little bit more pointed and directed. Shinji, of course, is breaking down, as he often is. And Toji, he has no idea what the hell is going on. He's just like, what is this? Like, why am I here? The beats for that conversation opens with Rei asking Shinji, why did you do such a thing? Shinji answers, I couldn't forgive my father. I couldn't forgive him for betraying me. I finally felt like I could talk to him, and he does this. Father, he doesn't care about how I feel at all. Rei answers, Shinji, did you try to understand your father's feelings? Shinji says, I did try to understand. Why won't you try to understand? I tried to, I really did. And then she cuts back to, like you said, the parallel of what the angel asked him. So you're just going to run away from things that hurt you? And Shinji then snaps back, so what? What's wrong with running away from hurting and pain? And Toji from the distance just like, what are those two always bickering about? Which I'm like, I don't recall Rei and Shinji ever really bickering, but I just think Toji just has no idea what's going on. He's just like, whatever, man, this is weird. I don't think he even realizes this isn't reality at this moment.
Toji's like the stoner without being a stoner.
Yeah, more or less. So that's my interpretation. Very much in line with what you had. But yes, I think the fact that they've all now been, at least momentarily, obviously Shinji and Toji for much longer periods of time, infected in some way, contaminated in some way by direct angel contact, that I think now has created some loose bridge for them in which they can connect and communicate, which then makes me wonder, do angels have this ability to communicate amongst themselves similarly? I don't know. So at the hospital, then we see Toji waking up. The class rep is there. Shinji in the other bed is no longer there. Apparently he's woken up and been gone for a little bit now. Toji was in the hospital for 3 days. And when he asks the class rep why she's there, she just kind of blushes like, well, I'm the class rep. It's an official capacity. I just have to make sure you are up to speed on the things you're. It's like, okay, all right. Chick, just tell him. It's okay. You can just tell him how you feel, because at this point it's obvious you're blushing and coming unglued anyway.
Still oblivious though.
Yeah, somehow he is. Did you notice on the wider shot they show that he's actually missing a leg? Because I didn't notice that until this viewing.
I'm sorry, what?
He's under the covers, but he's like missing like his entire left leg, almost all the way to the hip, it looks like.
I did not notice that at all. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that.
So I've gone through the series a few times now. This is, I think, my 4th complete viewing. And it's the first time I actually paused the episode and like looked at it, and I was like, yeah, I think so. Cause you can see like where his right leg is, but there's nothing there. I've never noticed that before. I don't recall any subsequent scenes or anything that would prove or disprove that. So I don't know. That's what I observed. We'll revisit that, I guess. But
you see his leg missing in the future?
Honestly, you don't see much Toji in the future.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
But if that's the case with his leg and everything, it adds another sort of dimension to the tragedy. Even though he's survived this thing, we've been told before that his parents are kind of negligent or neglectful of him and his sisters. He has multiple sisters. This woman that has been in the hospital is his youngest sister, and it's kind of been his job to take care of her. And so now if he's missing a leg, that's a question of like, okay, how's he going to be able to take care of her if like he himself has been kind of like permanently not just crippled, but you know what I mean, like affected by this? Is he going to be able to do that in his physical capability now? Assuming that Nerv actually kept the deal, she should be in the same hospital because they're in the Nerv HQ medical facility, obviously. So I thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic, because the one thing he asks the class rep is to tell his little sister that he's all right. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting little back and forth there. Kind of plays into a little bit of the tragedy for him. The one reason that he agreed to pilot the Eva was if they transferred her to that hospital. And now it's cost him not his life, but his ability to actually look after her beyond that. Yeah. Then this part's a little funny. We cut to Shinji being brought in handcuffs, multiple sets of handcuffs, mind you.
Triple handcuffs. He's been in jail.
Yeah. To Gendo, but he's not just Gendo. This is the first time in the series I hear this phrase come up, this title. He is introduced as the Supreme Commander. I was like, he's been Commander Akari. When did we add Supreme to the title? I have no idea, but Supreme Commander Gendo Akari. And Gendo starts reading off his list of crimes. Now, again, if you're looking at the subtitles versus the Netflix dub, what it says varies a little bit, but it boils down to insubordination, personal use of an Eva, and immature blackmail.
Immature blackmail. I was like, what?
All of which are very serious crimes, he says. So serious, in fact, each one of them gets you a pair of handcuffs. It's a very strange thing, but Shinji basically is just like, yeah, all right, well, I never want to pilot an Eva again. Like, when asked what he has to say for himself, just, I never want to pilot an Eva again. Gendo's like, all right, very well, then get out.
Cool, get out.
Yeah, again, I don't think, whereas when Shinji ran away the first time and was even removed from like the database, and then at the train station, that long scene with him and Misato staring at each other, he came back that time, which makes me wonder, I guess at the time, Gendo just assumed Rei would be able to step in without really following that through. So he was lucky Shinji came back. This time, he's like, nah, I got the dummy plug. I don't need him. If he's not going to be obedient, if he's not going to do what I ask, then it's not worth it. And so
Shinji's line here is great too.
He says,
it. I'll go back to where you left me. I was like, damn.
Yep. I'll go back to the hole you left me in. Gendo, then as Shinji starts to turn and walk away, Gendo just says he's very disappointed in him, and he doubts he'll ever see him again. I loved Shinji's response even better when Gendo's like, I doubt I'll ever see you again. Shinji just replies, I hope so. Like, I hope you're right about that. Like, ooh, Gendo catches the backhand when he thought he was the one delivering the kill shot there.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes, I said, Shinji is finally free, because this is really I would say this was the final cut that needed to happen to sever that relationship.
That need
And
for approval.
yeah, even with what comes up later, I mean, what he has with Gendo will never be recovered at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So Shinji's removed from the Nerv database. Rei will now become the pilot of Unit 1, and the dummy plug will be her backup. You see Shinji then, I guess, I guess it's just back at Misato's apartment. He hasn't moved out yet, or he's already maybe gone somewhere. I think he's still just in his room at Misato's apartment. He's just staring up at the ceiling, which he is so often doing. It's like the train situation, that shot with the sepia tone and everything, and Shinji staring at a ceiling. Those are like the two things you just get all the time in Eva. He's staring up at the ceiling, and you hear an answering machine message being left in real time. He doesn't answer the phone. It's what's his name? Kinsuke? Yeah, Kinsuke leaving him a message, and he just doesn't understand why Shinji's leaving town. And as he starts going into like some of the details of like, everyone knows I wanted to pilot an Eva more than anyone, but even Toji, and then a recording overtakes basically confirming, yes, their calls have been tapped this whole time. Basically just says like, restricted in various ways, call terminated, basically. So yeah, that's interesting there, but I think it also, as it relates to Kinsuke, it kind of leans on what we said before, that he's kind of the most immature of the three. Like, he's the one who doesn't see or understand the scope of the danger of it. Like Shinji, obviously going through this mental and physical, emotional trauma, all of that. And now even with Toji being horribly maimed the way he was, even though Kinsuke knows that he was the pilot and how that went, he's still like, everyone knows I wanted to be the pilot. Like, you're still trying to volunteer after this? You got two friends in the world. One's emotionally a wreck and scarred and broken, and the other one is basically, missing a leg, again, my observation, and horribly mangled in that way. Like, why would you be still bemoaning the fact they didn't choose you?
I like to think that whoever was monitoring that call was like, God, this is boring. All right, due to security concerns, we had to disconnect.
Yeah.
Like, I can't listen to another second of this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. So then we have Misato and Shinji, and again, it's a little bit of a cold scene, but I kind of like it because it shows even the divide with them. Shinji just wants to know, why was it Toji? Misato explains the whole thing we talked about before, that the students were all potential pilots. She says, I only recently learned this. And she's kind of trying to tell Shinji, like, look, I'll keep your room for you. I'll keep all your stuff exactly the same. Just you take your time. And if you're ready to come back, it'll be fine. And Shinji's like, I don't want it. Get rid of it all. And she then kind of goes on to say that she had pinned all of her hopes, dreams, aspirations, all of it onto Shinji, and what he had the potential to do. And she's like, she knows it's unfair. She knows that's an unfair thing, but she says it was necessary. And Shinji just straight up calls her out for like, that's a really selfish thing to say. Like, after everything this is doing to me, you're just like, yeah, but you'll disappoint me. Don't you understand? And it's just like, yeah, he's done. He again reiterates, I won't ever pilot an Eva again. Yeah.
Now, she makes a comment, and I wanted to draw back to Gendo's, one of the last things he said, is he said, I mean, we know he's done at this point. He is not relying on Shinji. He said, delete the third children out of the system.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, that didn't seem like a task that was going to Misato. Now, maybe it carries down the line to her, but she makes a mention of, I'm going to keep your passcode.
Your clearance, yeah.
Yeah, which to where we get later is he comes back to HQ, and we won't dive too much into that. But
Yeah.
without that, could he have made the decisions that he made? Because
Probably,
if she
yeah.
closed that passcode, he might not have been able to get to where he got.
Probably not, yeah, because even if he had to go a different route for what ends up happening, it would have been much more difficult to get where he needed to get. Of course, you don't see him making the travel, so they could have explained it away however they wanted. But I think that's what they're trying to get at for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Misato even notes like this is the most assertively he's spoken before, which is completely out of character. And so she's kind of like admiring that he's finally like standing on his own 2 feet, even as he's basically shutting her down and saying like, I'm done with every one of you. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I admire you, but damn it, that's bad for me. That does not help what I have to deal with still. And then right on cue, right as Shinji for like the 3rd time, it's like the 3 calling Candyman in the mirror 3 times. He says for the 3rd time, I think, I will never pilot an Eva again. Just then, sirens blaring in the distance. An angel is attacking. And now Shinji's going to have to rush to shelter. And it's like, oh, so we're going to... I thought we might actually get to see a little bit more of like that side of things. We don't really get to see a whole lot of times with like the people being rushed into shelter. But you don't get a lot of it here. So we
you can just like feel how annoying that would be too. Yeah. Like I've had so much control, like literally this call happens, you know, it's like a firefighter that's like watching a building burn down. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
I want to jump in there, but I can't. I have no equipment.
Yep, exactly. So we get an immediate confrontation here. They're sending this powerful angel. It's a real interesting design for this one too. Very unsettling angel even before it like does anything. But they have Unit 2, Eva Unit 2 deployed, ready to defend HQ, and they're basically already starting this fight essentially at the geo front. Like this angel smashes through so fast. It's like just to get to where HQ is and everything, where it's like, oh man, remember when angels in the past was like 30 seconds of constant drilling, or that one drilled for like 12 hours to breach the surface? This thing's just there in like a moment, and they're like throwing N2 mines at it, and it's just not even blinking. This is like a stupid powerful angel, which again, if this one is maybe this one's the 13th one, and the one that I don't remember the number count, but whatever it is, this one is so far and above the other ones, it seems like.
Oh yeah.
And it's a really unique design, like I mentioned. It appears to have no legs, although it does actually have them. They're just little, cute little nubby legs. It just kind of like floats, but then its arms are like these like almost knife ribbons or whatever. It like unfurls.
That's a great way to put it, knife ribbon.
Yeah, it like unfurls its arms, and my immediate thought was, oh God, what was like late 90s, early 2000s was like slap bracelets.
Yes.
Except extreme. Yeah.
Or like those little things you know, the party things you blow out, and like unfolds.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it's descending into the geo front, and Asuka's just unloading on it with her rifle. This thing's not even blinking. Again, N2 mines are doing nothing to it, so I don't know why they thought an Eva shooting a rifle or something at it was going to do anything. But this thing unspools its arms and just immediately lops off both of Asuka's arms, like her Ava's arms. And you're just like, oh, that was a big deal last episode when Rey lost an arm that was just jettisoned. She didn't have it like straight cut off like that. So Asuka's neural connection is all there. She is just writhing in pain. You know, this whole time before she loses the arm, she's like, I won't lose again. I won't keep failing. Because she knows now Shinji's out. Like, everything is me. It's my job to do this now. And immediately I'm up against this huge task of like, oh, wow, it's already at HQ. It's nothing has ever been at this stage. I mean, I guess you had the one that was technically inside HQ, the computer thing. But this is just a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
And she's beaten in seconds. Disarmed. It's almost like her own.
Disarmed, yes.
Yeah, disarmed, yeah. Her piss and vinegar. She's just like basically screaming, charging without arms, Unit 2 at this thing. And Misato has a good bit of quick thinking, because she's like, oh my God, what an idiot. So she immediately yells to someone in the command center to disengage the neural connection, because right at that instant, another ribbon arm shoots out and suddenly Unit 2 has no head.
Yeah, sever the connection. The second she finishes that, she severed the head.
Yep.
So it's like you literally would have been dead if Masato didn't say that. And at this point, we don't really know what's happened. Now,
Yeah.
we've watched the episode. We know that Asuka's still alive. But at that point, you're like, is she? Did they sever it in time? Because we saw Shinji's throat the last time. And if that's anything like what's going to happen, you're toast after that.
Yep.
And I wanted to go back for just a second. So we go into sending Rei into Unit 1.
Yes.
With the dummy plug as a backup. When Rei gets in the cockpit for this Eva, she can't sync to Unit 1 anymore.
Right. She nearly throws up.
Yeah, everything goes red. She has that same kind of feeling like when the LCL was
contaminated or going bad.
Or when Gendo like ramped it up so Shinji would get out of the cockpit.
Yep.
And she says, her line is something along the lines of, this won't work anymore.
Yeah.
Which at this point you're like, wait, why will it not work anymore? What happened that's like different now? And I'm like racking my brain trying to figure this out. And I can tell by that damn smile on your face. You know what the answer to that question is.
Yeah. We'll get into that. But yeah, so not only can Rei not do it, they're trying to engage the dummy plug. And Unit 1's just like, nah.
Don't want to play.
Nah, I'm done playing with you. And Rei is struggling, obviously. She realizes, like, if this isn't going to work, she said, even if I die, I can be replaced. And that's, like, a really depressing sort of view. It definitely encompasses Rei here. But because she can't pilot Unit 1, she has to go back to Unit 0, which is missing an arm. And she just doesn't care that she's in this situation of like, if I die, I can be replaced, I guess. So it's interesting. Gendo, I think, leaves his station at that time. He's going to go keep trying to figure out why they can't get the dummy plug to work with Unit 1. And so they're trying to figure that out. You have Asuka dispatched of. Meanwhile, the Unit 2, when its head gets lopped off, literally crashes into the shelter where Shinji is. Unit 2's head is like laying in front of him. And I was like, oh, boy, that would have me feeling all kinds of immediate guilt if I saw that, because he doesn't know the neural connection was severed. For all he knows, Asuka is now dead seconds into this, like seconds into him quitting, essentially. And that's one of those things you would have to be like, wow, could I have prevented that? I mean, I can't bear doing this, but like now I have to live with this person's blood on my hands potentially. Like, that's awful. Heavy stuff there. Let me see. I'm trying to see where we're at. Gendo goes to try and figure out what's going on with the dummy plug. You have Shinji then back on surface side, and who's there? Kaji. Now, I mentioned last episode that Misato actually referenced that Kaji would be taking over command of something, but it ended up being Gendo. Now, Gendo obviously trumps Kaji, but Kaji kind of gives a little bit of insight into what might have happened, why there might have been a last-minute switch that Misato didn't initially tell Shinji about. First of all, Kaji's just tending to his watermelon patch, which I find hilarious. Like, literally, like, Nerv HQ is under siege. There's an active battle going on in the distance.
Bombs are going off in the background, and he's just like, la, ta, 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 ta.
Think about his history too with Asuka, and he's just like, yeah, Unit 2. Damn. Just grow the watermelon. Hope for the best.
I'm sure he's just thinking, wow, my life's going to be so much easier with this girl not bothering me every 5 seconds.
Yeah. So he's unconcerned with this battle unfolding, and when Kaji asks what Shinji's doing, Shinji just says like, oh, I've decided to never pilot an Eva again. And Kaji's reaction is just kind of like, okay. Like, he doesn't really judge anything, but he's almost like a little bit like, oh, wow, I guess that is a call. I'm not going to tell you if I think it's a bad call or not. But he basically just says, like, I wrote his partial quote here, why he wasn't in the command center. He's like, because they learned about my side job, I'm no longer allowed to man a combat station. So instead, I'll just water these plants. And Shinji's like, even at a time like this? And his answer is, oh, especially at a time like this. I mean, I'd rather rest my head on Misato's bosom, but I want to be here when I die. And I like that just little nod back to, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's I'd rather be doing something else, but if I'm given the choice, given the circumstance, yeah, I think this is where I'd rather go if I have to go.
And I don't think this was like planned at all. I think he legitimately is accepting fate at this point. He's like, hey, we're screwed at this point. Like, I might as well water the watermelons and call it a day.
Yep.
Now, it's great that he happens upon Shinji, because I would say that Kaji is probably the most important character in this episode by far, even though it ultimately comes down to Shinji. But without Kaji, I don't know if we would have arrived at that same conclusion or in time.
Yeah. And you might have hellfire and bombs going off all around you, but Kaji's about to drop his own bomb, because here's his quote. I wanted to write it out here. He says, yes, if an angel comes into contact with Adam, who's sleeping under us, it's believed the third impact would occur and mankind would perish. The only way to stop it is by relying on something with the same power as the angels, the Evangelions. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, we kind of were starting to think in that along those lines, but like, that's a pretty crystal clear thing. So, okay, so we don't know what happens when the angels get there, but if they get there, it basically completes the series of impacts we've been going through. This would be the third impact and wipe out the rest of humanity. And it's like, yeah, those are some high stakes. So,
to which at this point, I feel like you've got it from Shinji's perspective. It's one of those scenes that's like, that would have been good information to be brought to my attention yesterday.
Exactly. Like, if someone had just told me that, I would have not left like I did, and Asuka would maybe not possibly be dead right now. Again, for all I know. Yeah. And again, while all this is going on, we see then Rei in Unit 0 raise up and missing an arm, but carrying an N2 mine in the other, charge at the angel. She can't even hold a rifle because her Eva is missing an arm.
Everyone's such a badass in this episode.
Oh, I know. Like the girls, even though Asuka's plan was really stupid, it still was like a reckless gutsiness that you're just like,
yeah, ballsy as hell.
Yeah. Like, I'll rip out your throat with my teeth. Like, that was like the tone of her charge earlier. And now Rey's kind of doing something similar, but everybody is freaked out by this. Like, Rey says she's going to raise her AT field to full power to try and penetrate through the Angel's AT field, which an AT field is just kind of like a psychic barrier, essentially, that like humans technically have AT fields as well. It's like the walls we keep around our heart, like how we keep people at bay by withholding part of ourselves. It's just that in the case of like the Evas and the Angels, it's a more physical, almost psychic barrier. But she's going to raise her AT field to full power to try and pierce through that one and basically shove the N2 mine in the thing's stupid, gaping, ghost face looking face. And you have multiple people reacting to this, including Gendo. You have Misato, Shinji, and Gendo basically all like, Rey, no! Like, they know. Rey is literally going out on essentially a suicide mission here because, as she said earlier, I can be replaced. It doesn't matter if I die. So she's going to try and go out in a blaze of glory to save the day. And it doesn't go well. She does get through the... I don't know if she gets through the AT field fully. I think she does, and it's that the angel...
She gets through it, but then the angel like closes
covers
its
up.
Little eye from where she needs to be.
Yep, so the N2 mine goes off, again, in Unit 0's face as well. And when it comes up, it has no defense. Unit 0 is basically already toast. And then it gets impaled. And it's just like, wow, so we might be without both of them now, and Shinji has quit. Whew. this is getting a little bit spicy here. Like this is full doomsday scenario. How many episodes are left? Okay. Like that's almost like your only comfort is like, okay, they have to figure something out here. And we then have again Kaji telling Shinji, he's like, all I can do is water my plants here, but there is something you can do, something that can be done, something can be done that only you have the power to do. No one's going to force you. You need to think about it and decide. Figure out what you need to do right now so you don't have any regrets later, all right? So he's basically, again, he's just suddenly all philosophical. He's given all these words of wisdom to Shinji, like, there's still a hope here. It's you, but you have to live with it one way or the other. So you got to make a decision. And that's
he's so nonchalant about it too.
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, huh, here you go. I mean, we can't force you to do what we think is the right thing. Like the call is ultimately up to you. You want the world to end? It ends. Like your choice, make it. And I think although he is like very calm in the way he says that, I think he realizes the impact of his words.
Yeah.
And chooses them very carefully in that moment because he knows that that conversation will ultimately lead to everyone on planet Earth dying.
Yeah, and I think I imagine that's something he was already kind of mulling over in his head because while everything is unfolding with Rei and all of that, I imagine Kaji was already like, as soon as he sees Shinji and they have that initial little chat about like, oh, especially now at a time like this, I think he was already kind of starting to workshop that answer in his head. Again, like you said, carefully choosing his words. And then once it's like, okay, kid, this is it. You got to decide right now because we are essentially out of time. I'm not going to judge you for whatever happens, but you got to live with either consequence. So walk us through this next scene now as Shinji steps back into action.
Yeah, so the main shaft is now totally exposed. The dummy plug is still getting refused. Like, we are ultimately fucked at this point.
Yep.
Shinji gets back. His hand is doing that same twitching thing it always does, and he's talking to Gendo, and he's saying, why are you back here? To which we're still getting a lot of resistance from Gendo.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shinji just looks at him, and we know at this moment, with the way he says what he says, I'm the pilot of Unit 1. He is no longer doing this for anyone other than himself. He realizes that it's not about Gendo's approval. It's not about what Masato thinks. It is literally because he has chosen this to be the path for his life, and nobody can pilot Unit 1 but him. And, oh gosh, I'm just like, I'm so freaking excited at this point. I'm like losing my mind.
Yep. Yeah.
So the Angel's headed straight for Central Dogma. Masato is standing eye to eye with this Angel, gripping her cross necklace. Everyone standing there is like, this is it. We're done. Like, there is no coming back from this. Shinji crashes through the freaking wall, grabs this thing, diverts it, and I don't know why. This is my favorite line in the entire episode.
Okay.
Shinji's got it pinned against the wall, and I think it's cut off his arm at this point.
Yeah, it's already disarmed him as well.
Yeah, it cut off his arm. Gendo's covered in blood, just like looking at this thing with not a sense of things are going to go well. I'm sure he's looking at that like, great, he lost an arm. Like, I don't know what we're going to do at this point. And Shinji backs it up to the wall, which at this point I'm not really remembering the setup of this whole thing. We've seen it before, but he's pinned it against the wall. He says, Miss Masato. She goes, launch Unit 5.
Yep.
Boom, flies to the sky. And I was like, I literally have butterflies in my stomach at this point because I just love to watch them work together. As much as she's like always leading him, that was such a team effort from both of them. And it was so enjoyable to just like, she's in his head. She knows what he's thinking immediately. And if she didn't act, they're screwed. But She gets it away. He gets it away. Oh, I'm so digging it at this point.
Yeah.
So I'll let you get into once we're above ground.
Okay. I love that all too. I also love, you mentioned earlier when he's telling Gendo, like, because I'm the pilot of Eva Unit 1, he also adds in, and this is the part where I got butterflies, where he goes, I'm Shinji Ikari. And like, in my head, I was just like, yeah, say my name, bitch. Like, even Gendo's kind of like, all right, get in the robots.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
man. Like, even Gendo's like, all right, yes, you're ready. Yeah, so they stepped on that like propulsion elevator thing that launches the Evas to the surface. Misato, like you said, same page as Shinji, launches them back up, which is the perfect move. What I love too is even though Shinji, he's fighting like a savage. He is screaming, he's yelling, he's fighting with a viciousness that we haven't really seen him fight. And it's actually a great action scene too. And even with all that wildness, like you said with the elevator, you see that he's still fighting intelligently. There's strategy to what he's doing. And him being on the same page with Misato, they're able to take what is an absolute hopeless scenario and at the very least put some safe distance between themselves and the Angel, at least as it relates to Dogma, for them to actually try and operate through. So that's great. On the surface, Shinji, again, keeps fighting this thing with like everything that he's got. And it's getting to the point where it looks like he's about to end it. He's smashing this thing. He's like, you almost can feel him like getting ready for like his like victory screech or something where he's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden just Unit 1 is run out of power.
Flipping power.
That was the moment, first time I saw that, I just went.
You're just like, no.
Yeah.
But something else we didn't mention is Shinji is not suited up. He is literally wearing like street clothes.
It's a parallel to episode 1. It's the only other time he pilots Unit 1 in street clothes.
Oh, okay.
And it's the same thing. Him coming in, him and Gendo in that face-off is a perfect parallel to the first episode, their first encounter at Nerv. So that's what we're paralleling here as far as that, like that experience and kind of the wayward son or the prodigal son returning, essentially.
Yeah, this is like, have you seen Game of Thrones?
Parts of it. I haven't seen everything. So I might not get the reference.
Not going to make that reference. It will ruin things.
All right.
But yes, this moment happens. The power's out. Everyone is probably screaming at their television, watching this for the first time. Just like, no, we were so close.
Yep.
And this thing is laying waste to Shinji right now.
Oh yeah.
So you want to get into that a little bit?
Yes, because now we're getting into like the big answers here. We're starting to don't get me wrong, we're raising a lot of questions as we do it, but we're starting to really pull back the layers here and understand some things. So Shinji is begging Unit 1 to respond. And again, we've seen Unit 1 do this before when it was in total power down. Did it in the first episode, I believe. I think they showed it to you in the second episode because he gets basically lobotomized first. But he's just shaking the controls and just pleading with it to fight. The Angel, meanwhile, has ripped open the chest of Unit 1, and there appears to be a core there. And it's just stabbing with its arms, just repeatedly, just trying to break through it. You see the entry plug is cracking. You're just like, oh my God. Like, this is all about to come to an end. And then... well, Shinji's line here, he says, if you don't move, everyone's going to die. I don't want that anymore, which is a very apropos thing here because on command, it seems, Unit 1 suddenly wakes up. Its eyes glow and it's back like it's acting not like a robot anymore, but almost like its own sentient type being. And it goes back on the offensive. It knocks the Angel back, rips off, I think, one of the arms or something, grabs it to its severed arm at the stump, and basically just draws down, and it regrows an arm, but it's not just an arm. It looks a lot like a human arm.
Human arm, yeah.
And
it's like it put something over the arm too, which I couldn't really figure out. So when it first it rips the arms off the Angel essentially, but what it does is this foil is coming for it, and it's like its fingers are knives now, and it shreds it all the way down, grabs it, and then pulls it like so close to its body. And I mean, awesome scene, but you're like, how is it doing? It's like it gained strength that it didn't have before, like way beyond what Shinji could power.
Or its power that it did have, but it didn't have access to, potentially. Yeah. So it rips off the arm. It regrows now a human arm, and it's screaming. Jaws unhinged. It's screaming. And this sounds different. We've heard Berserk mode Unit 1 before. This one sounds different. First of all, some of the sounds it's making and the way it starts moving is very unsettling. It's very like primate-like, essentially.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
And Risuko is saying, it's happening after all. She's awake. And you're like, huh? What? Unit 1 scream, like I said earlier, does not sound like it sounded before. It sounds more feminine to me. And that is an interesting thing too. So what is your immediate thought there? Where does that take you?
I don't even know where to go from this point. I'm watching this in my notes. I said, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Did it just grow
that's when you texted me.
Did it just grow a damn human arm?
Yeah.
And at this point, we get that Unit 1 sync rate is over 400%.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, no, it's like fully synced at this point. Like we have never seen anything to this level. But yeah, it's an animal. Like it is crawling on all fours, like it's a monkey or a gorilla. And it's just like, I don't even know at this point. I was expecting there to be some creature under it, but like it's so primal that I wasn't expecting that. I expected it to be a little bit more like evolved, whereas we get to like this thing is like a Neanderthal level of intelligence is what it looks like. It's just operating on primal instinct. And when we see the human arm, I don't know what I think at this point. I am also still thinking, and I think I'm probably off on this, but what has this been the whole time? And does this have something to do? I mean, I feel like there's this weird thing with the connection between Shinji and Rei and the Evas, at least with Unit 0 and Unit 1. And I think Eva Unit 1 is maybe a Gendo creation. I don't know how, and I don't know if I'm right. But maybe it's a combination of Shinji's mother and Adam, and he used those two things to grow whatever this being is. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something completely different that we don't know about. But there is this weird link between Shinji and this Eva to the point where it's always protected him when something has gone wrong. And it leads me back to Risuko talking about central dogma and her mother's consciousness, and there being that part about the mother built in. And that makes me think that it's the same thing with this Eva, whether maybe that wasn't initially how it came into being, but I think Shinji's mother is in some way incorporated into it. Maybe just its consciousness, maybe similar to what they're doing with like rebuilding Rei or Rei's clone. But I think she is a part of that, and she is what comes out every time Shinji's in trouble and what leads to its ultimate like awakening.
Yeah, remember so there's all kinds of breadcrumbs in there where you're touching on little facts and stuff, not necessarily going the right direction, but some of the things that you're pointing at are correct things to pick up. It's just what they amount to that's not quite there. But yes, remember in the direct C, Shinji and everything when he was basically right at death's door, essentially there, accepting death. Yeah, that there's kernels in that as well. So Unit 1 back on the offensive in a savage, vicious form. like we have never seen, basically effortlessly rips through the Angel's AT field and then begins to just tear it apart with its bare hands. But it does not stop there. It starts to devour the Angel. And this is the moment where I was just like, that shot where it's like looking back at the camera and its eyes are glowing and it's like gruel and just clumps of like angel meat basically falling from its mouth. I was just like, oh, I did like, that's just not a visual I anticipated in the Eva universe. If anything, I would have thought it would have been the other way, like in this universe where like some Eva pilot is defeated and the Angel is feasting on it. That would have been the version of it I expected, not an Eva eating an Angel. That was where I was just like, holy shit. Okay. Just a haunting shot. One of my favorite shots of the series. And as it's eating the Angel, it starts to jettison these parts of its armor from its shoulders, its back, its chest. Did you catch what it was that it ate?
So it says that it's able to ingest the S2 drive
And
on
you
its
remember
own,
that? Yep.
which I didn't necessarily see that, and I'm trying to understand like what is the S2 drive?
I have answers. Okay.
Give it to me.
So the S2 drive, which you remember is what they were trying to develop at the second branch before it disappeared. The S2 drive is the Angel's power source, and it is essentially limitless energy. The Evas, conversely, require the umbilical cord, which is why Nerv wanted to develop from the remains of angels that they encountered over the months, however long, why they wanted to develop their own S2 drive so that they wouldn't be confined to the umbilical cords. That's why when you destroy the power source, it is the core. The S2 drive is the Angel's core. That's why when you destroy it, the Angel dies. So that is what it ate. It's basically like Eva Unit 1 ate the heart of the Angel. And that sets about a frightening, more or less, transformation, kind of. As again, it's jettisoning all of these parts of its armor and everything. And you get this line. It's essentially Eva Unit 1 plus this limitless power of the S2 drive is essentially like a godlike being that cannot be contained by this world. Humans can't control it. And Risuko is even saying, those are the restraints. Here's the quote. Those are restraints we attach to keep the true powers of the Eva at bay. It's breaking through our bondage through its own might. Humanity has lost the means of holding that Eva back. And I was just like, oh, what does this mean? Where is this going to go? Just awe-inspiring. And again, we're still climbing, baby. We're still climbing. We got a ways to go. We can't even see the summit yet. It's too high. But we're already up there, and we're already at this part in the series. I was like, I can't think of many movies or shows that I've watched that have like pushed boundaries this far and like had you like some shows will do stuff that's like super ambitious and you're kind of like, all right, so I just kind of roll with it if I want to enjoy it. I have to like suspend disbelief or something. This has done every step of the way so well that as this is happening, I'm just in awe and I'm like, oh my God, and we're going to keep going? This is amazing. Like it has me hooked. It has me buying in, and it's not just like, all right, let's just pay attention to the action sequences or whatever because the story is a little convoluted or a little bit pretentious, whatever. No, this feels like it has earned every step of this path, and I'm amazed that to this point they've boxed all of this in 19 episodes so well that I'm just accepting this kind of shit.
Yeah, and Kaji has a line here too, and he says, the awakening and liberation of Unit 1. I don't think Sele is going to like this.
Yeah.
So we get to Gendo.
I like his line too, his delivery. He's just like, huh, the awakening and liberation. Like, it's just like whimsical. Like, huh, he's not going to like that.
Yeah. So we get to Gendo, and he's being asked about this being part of the plan, to which I don't know if I think that he did think this was part of the plan. I think that it didn't go the way he thought it was going to go. Now he says like, oh, yes, totally. But at this time, I'm thinking like, that's more of like, yeah, I meant for this. to be exactly like it is right now. I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It could be. He could actually know. He could not. But
I don't think it's that he orchestrated I don't think he orchestrated to push Shinji away by killing or attempting to kill Toji, and then arrange the angel attack and everything else that came from it. I think it's that the end point of what he wanted was Eva Unit 1 to consume the S2 drive of an angel, so that it would be in position for whatever, this ascending to whatever borderline godlike status, like they're making it sound like it is. And that's probably not even the term. That's just, I think they refer to it almost in like a godlike way. It's not like it actually is a god. But the way it ascended, that boost of power, unleashing of its power, whatever, is what I think Gendo wanted. I think he probably anticipated like, oh, we'll be able to do this with the S2 drive because look how savage this thing was for me when it came to fighting an angel before. So the way they got there isn't what he planned, but where they stand now with Unit 1 having this upgrade essentially is like, yes, now my plan where I diverge from Sele, that is now in position to move forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a great episode, man. I thoroughly love this episode. Can't say enough good things about it. It's one of the few episodes that was just truly white knuckle for me. I'm gripping the couch, the arm of the couch. I'm like putting my hands on my face as like certain things happen. It's just like so good. And I'm ready to dive into the next episode.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's hard. It was hard not to watch back to back, but
yeah.
I am looking forward to next week's for sure.
Yep, and you'll get some more answers as well on that because now the hits start coming and they don't stop coming. So every episode is going to be a revelation now. But I think that about does it for this episode. This has been a fun chat. We'll be back next with episode 20. Let me check the episode title of that. Episode 20 is Of the Shapes of Heart and Human. So we'll get into that, and we're going to find out what exactly happens now with Unit 1 after it has devoured an angel and the S2 drive. But that does it for our time here. You may think our take's cheap, but to you we say, get your own podcast. Talk about it if you want. We're going to do our thing, and we're going to be back next week to talk more Eva. I've been Zarek.
And I've been Matt.
Until next time, guys. Peace.